on this episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Join us on the Therapy Bites Art Lab podcast today, where we will talk about the struggle juggle, the psychology of becoming a change champion, and we will have a world-class guest, Dai Manuel, who is a dad. He is a person who loves talking about dating his wife. I'm a big fan of that also. He is a lifestyle business mentor and coach, a high performance coach. Join us for the episode.
Welcome to Therapy Bites Art Lab, where Dr. Heath and his special guests share real-life stories of helping and healing, fresh from the actual therapy couch, while taking a bite out of common counseling missteps and misconceptions. And now, here's Heath and the TBAL Team.
Hey, Dai, thank you so much for being here all the way from Vancouver. We have the privilege of streaming you digitally. As uncomfortable as that may sound, if we did it in real life, it'd be like sucking you through a wormhole. Streaming you digitally into what we call the Art Lab. And the Art Lab stands for Accurate Realistic Thinking, Life Affirming Beliefs, and it is where we do experiments of what works and what doesn't work to help people, as we say, biggie size or big in their lives. And you have a lot of experience both professionally and personally with that, and we'd love to hear some of your stories, and we would love to have you share some of your wisdom today. So welcome, and we're so grateful for you being here with us.
Oh, Dr. Heath, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and absolutely love the setup. You know, it was awesome coming in to having all four of you smiling back at me, because I talked about a warm welcome. I was like, all right, the party has started. You know, so it's just really an honor to be here. So, and also we're talking about something I'm, you know, not a stranger to, like most of us, change, right? And sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. But either way, you got to learn how to have that positive mindset as we adapt through it, you know? So, but yeah, I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
You know, we have a saying in Arkansas where we are that about the weather, and I guess they have it many places. If you don't like it, stick around, it's going to change. And I agree. I think that's part of life. And I've been in some recent social media debates. I love my social media debates about stress. And what I don't think people understand is that stress is actually engineered into the fabric of the universe, which means that stress is and always will be part of our life. And the best we can do is to learn to adapt to changing stressors. And what are some of the ways that you find that people sabotage themselves? And we'll talk about the downside first. We call it from the deep, dark recesses beneath the therapy couch, some ways that people sabotage their lives by not really doing well with change.
I think that's the first step, right? Is that change is sometimes it comes when it's not wanted, or sometimes when it's not expected. And, you know, to sort of piggyback what you said there a second ago, Dr. Heath, was, you know, this idea of stress and really evolution. You know, if you believe in Darwinism, which there's some pretty interesting facts there, some tidbits around evolution and the play that stress had in that evolvement. And what's really neat is when we think back to our DNA and the eons it's taken for us to get to where we are today as a species, humanity is very resilient. I mean, it's in our DNA. We are really good at handling hard stuff. And you look at some of the conditions that some people live in, and yet they're still thriving. There's still big communities and families and societies, you know, and there's something to that. I find it really inspiring. And now my climate change friends think that we're a bit too resilient as a species. But
too resilient. You know, that's a new one on me. I've not heard of that before. That a person can actually be too resilient. That's an interesting mindset.
Well, if you think about it, there's 8 billion of us, and we're pretty good at using up a lot of resources on this planet. And so, you know, and that doesn't come by chance. It has come through evolution, but we've navigated some really interesting things. And if we think back to our own lives, I mean, every one of us here today, the 5 of us, we all have stories of change. And we probably have some negative opinions of some of those changes because they might have been stuff that we didn't want. And I know for myself, every time I found myself fighting up against change and trying to do my darndest to avoid it, my mental health has slid into not a positive place. You know, I found it really hard. And as I say, you know, that struggle with the juggle that is life, when we're feeling really weighed down by change that we're going through or working through, I mean, it's tough to stay positive. right? It's really tough to stay up and to keep moving forward one step at a time. And I think we just got to remember that we are social beings as well. And so navigating these journeys of change doesn't have to be a solo journey. And I am someone that's still working on that aspect, that ability to ask for help, to be vulnerable, to say, you know what, I'm having a tough time with this. Can someone lend me a hand? And that's where the four of you come in, right? You're there to extend a hand and help, and just hopefully people reach back to say, yes, thank you. Please pull me along a little bit here. I need a hand up. And that's the message I really want to try to share with people, is that, once you open up about your struggles, it's amazing to see how many other people say, me too. And when you're not feeling so alone, those challenges, just the optimism naturally just oozes in, I feel, it does, at least for myself. Again, I'm speaking from my perspective as a man who identifies as a man, but people can take what they want of that, and hopefully they see that aspect of their own lives. And I mean, the longer we live, the more change we're going to have to navigate. So I like to think that we're all just working towards that level of expertise and mastery when it comes to change. But that's a belief I have yet to prove. But, I'm 46 now, and I figure I'm going to live to be about 130, 140 if it really goes well.
Man, I would love to be right there with you.
We'll have a follow-up call, Dr. Heath.
Hey, let's do it. Let's get that on the schedule right now. It'll give me a go to live up to. Something that you mentioned there, I've actually not thought about this, which I want to congratulate you for bringing this up, because I've never thought about this. But, you talked about, how we've become the dominant species on the planet, and we do real well, and we're very resilient, and we can count that as one of the reasons supporting our survival. But the thought that came to mind is, I guess, what you might call interpersonal or individual evolution, that it's really a journey of each one of us through self-evolution, developing our own level of resilience. But, I find just the opposite of that is that because the human species, especially the human brain, is so engineered to pick up on its radar threat and anything that might be a threat, any type of non-preferred event, situation, circumstance, people tend to, instead of embracing it, as you say, embrace the change, embrace the struggle, juggle the struggle, they tend to run the other way. What advice or wisdom would you share with people that have such a reactionary response to any difficulty presented by change in life?
I love that you bring this up, because, things are a little different now. I mean, when I'm walking down the street and I see that little bush on the other side, kitty corner to me, I'm not thinking, man, there's a saber-toothed tiger behind that thing. I better be careful here.
It could just be your wife.
That's right. But it's just the level of risk isn't quite the same anymore, right? Well, for most developed countries, I should say. Again, I can speak well to North America because I spent a lot of time here, my whole life, especially Canada. But we seem to find stress in many other places now. And I mean, I look at some of the stress that we put on ourselves, like one of the biggest causes, when I think back to certain relationships and certain clients, and even my own story, with relationships with some of the close people, it's interesting how finance and financial stress plays into people's emotional, psychological states, right? But also physical states. I mean, that's the thing about stress and fear. It's a very visceral response. You can see when you're experiencing it. And I think, to answer your question, it's becoming aware of some of those feelings that we get when we start to feel triggered, or we start to feel that fear response, especially that subconscious fear response, right? That one where, oh, my heart rate's going up. Oh, my hands are sweating. Oh my gosh, am I about to step on the stage and speak in front of a bunch of people? Or am I about to I think back 20 some odd years ago when I met my wife for the first time and asked her out for that first date. Well, that was a fear. I had to overcome that, and so we have experience of doing hard things and overcoming that fear response and moving forward anyways and being brave. Because that's how we learn. It's how we grow. It's how we connect also with others. I mean, is this aspect of vulnerability. But we're living in a very different time now. I mean, as I can still remember a time without Google, without the internet. As I tell my kids, my kids are like, "Oh, Dad, you're old." I'm like, "What are you talking about? You're not that old. Come on." And I think it's because they think back to one of my stories. My first real time with dealing with big change in my life, and it wasn't something that it came on, but it came on so gradually. I wasn't really aware of it until I was aware of it, if you know what I mean. And what I mean by this was at age 9, my parents separated and ultimately divorced. And emotionally and psychologically, it took me down a bunch of notches. And I wouldn't know how to articulate it back then. And to be fair, you know, this is, again, dating myself, this is like 35 years ago. No, more than that, 37 years ago. And back then, you know, there was a lot of stigmas and negative stigmas attached to this idea of divorce. Not like it is today. You know, like statistically, we know that more relationships actually end in divorce, right, than stay, which is, I mean, that's a whole nother conversation. But regardless, we have a lot more resources today. We also have a lot more conversations happening and ongoing, and we have a lot more support systems. So back then, I didn't have that. And I mean, there was one other kid in my class of 30 kids that didn't have parents that were still together. And that was weird, right? Like, it was tough. And so I turned, rather from being this external acting child, it started to internalize a lot of this stress and this overwhelm and this doubt and sadness and depression. And I learned really early on that I could escape those feelings when I would play video games, watch movies, and eat certain types of foods. Now, these weren't like I was craving big bowls of salad, okay? I wish that was the case, but I was craving foods that gave me an instant sort of gratification. But unfortunately, a lot of those foods that give it that instant, you know, sort of high, that escape type of experience, tend to be foods that aren't necessarily healthy on the long term. And, you know, so I was getting plenty of calories that just weren't very nutritious. And, you know, you compound that over 5 years. That was my normal habit, right? Was a lot of this escapism, of this avoiding this pain and dealing with the problem that was there. And rather than reconcile that, I just avoided it. And, you know, I got to a place where I remember at 15 years old, you know, going to the doctor with my mom, and her pulling my mom, you know, Dr. Grant pulling my mom aside and saying, "Betty Ann, your son dies morbidly obese." And you can imagine, you know, at 15 years old, I was like, I don't know what morbidly means. I don't know what obese means. But it doesn't sound good, you know? and I knew that I was not in a good place. You know, I was very isolated. I was very depressed, dealing with a lot of social anxiety. Gosh, you know, life was tough. It was really hard. And meanwhile, on the inside, I didn't want to be like that, but I didn't know how to make changes. I didn't know how to start. And to be fair, you know, I don't know if I really wanted to. You know, I got so comfortable. That was my normal, right? And I think that's another aspect that we have to remember, that the longer we go down a path of where we're maybe not in the healthiest place, we're feeling down, we're feeling low. Well, the longer we're in that place, that becomes the new normal. We sometimes forget what it was like to not feel like that. And sometimes it's hard to see that light at the end of the tunnel, pardon the cliche, but it's tough to see that if it's miles and miles and miles off, you know, and we forget that it took me 5 years to get to that state of unhealth. So for me to think that, oh gosh, you know, I should be able to change this right away, get healthy again. I mean, it doesn't, that feeling isn't, I didn't trust that feeling. You know, I didn't believe that it was possible, to be honest, which was, again, another reason why I wouldn't start and just keep down that path. And I remember at age 15, gosh, it was, I was at my dad's place for the weekend, and I had a habit of taking very long showers. And full disclosure, the reason why I would have long showers was the longer I'd stay in the shower, turn it up really hot, by the time I would get out, the mirror would be covered in condensation. And so this was my shower hack, so I didn't have to see my reflection.
So in other words, you were. This is actually more avoidance. You were avoiding.
Oh gosh.
Dealing with things through doing video games and movies and eating, and then it kind of built on itself, and you began to avoid even looking at yourself in the mirror.
There's like 2 images of me back then during that period of time for about, well, I'd say from about 13 to 15. There's only 2 photos I can find. And, you know, because back then, I mean, we didn't have like high pixel cameras sitting in our back pocket like we do now. But I mean, I'd hate to think if I had to live through that with social media like it is today. I have no idea what it would have been like. You know, like I feel for kids, you know, being a father of 2 teen girls, I see what they've had to navigate the last decade with all these changes in the online space. And I mean, it's an interesting world, you know, and this whole landscape is challenging enough as is, to compound it with a lot of these other tools and resources that are popping up. And there's really nobody teaching how to use it properly or how to protect ourselves, right? And sorry, I deviate here, but back at 15 years old, I get out of the shower, and this day I was being rushed by my dad. And so the mirror wasn't covered. I could see in my peripheral on my right side in the mirror, myself toweling off. And I have no idea why, Dr. Heath. I can honestly say I have no idea why, but that morning I turned into the mirror as I was toweling off, and I locked eyes with myself, and holy, it was like the first time I really saw me and saw how I was at that point in time. And it was like this representation of this manifestation of this internal stress that I was feeling was very present to me as an image. And it was weird because it was almost like this disconnect, like I was outside of myself, but I realized that was me. And I did the scan. I looked down, got to the belly, started to scan up. And by the time I got up, I had to start toweling off my chest because literally ugly crying, like just uncontrollable sobbing. And I was in there for a number of minutes, just sobbing and just feeling really down on myself. And I still can't quite explain what happened, but it was like in a moment, I just decided I want to be healthy. I do not want to be like this anymore. Now, I had no idea what to do next, but I left that wash and got, finished, toweled off, got dressed, found my dad out in the living room. I was like, Dad, I want to get healthy. And it must have been something my dad saw in me that day because, my parents had been very kind. They were trying to support me many years. They saw what was happening. I mean, any of us as parents, we know that when we see our children unhappy, we want nothing more than seeing that smiles back on those faces. And we're prepared to do whatever it takes to get them there. And so my parents are very kind, always offering up, help and support, like, let's find you a nice nutritionist. My mom was an RN, so she worked with some dietitians and some nutritionists. She was always saying, well, I can get you in to see our friend, like Nancy will come and see you. And then my dad's like, well, get your gym membership, or you want to do some martial arts. Anyways, every time they came to me, all I heard was, you don't like the way I am? You want me to change? I felt like I had zero value.
Now, that was something just also for our listeners and our viewers, because this is a vid pod also, but just to kind of put a frame around what you're hearing and seeing Dai say there is a bit of a neuroscience thing, kind of going back to when he saw himself in the mirror. Each of us create in our minds a pattern. You can look at dots on a page, and your brain connects the dots, and that's how we see ourselves. We actually build a pattern of how we see ourselves. But then when Dai looked in the mirror, he saw right there in stark reality the actual pattern of his body and decided that did not fit with how he wanted to view himself. And then we leap forward to what happened with his mom and his dad. Is he was actually projecting onto them what he thought they thought of him. We call that in our business mind reading. He was mind reading, saying to himself, and correct me, Dai, if I'm mistaken and off base here, but we see this a lot, that my parents think that I am of little value or no value. They think that I'm of less worth or no worth. And that's even if they don't say it. Now, some parents do say that. But again, for our listeners, let me just point out, do you ever say things, listener, that you don't really believe? You just say it? Or you say it and what you mean is not what the person in front of you seems to perceive? Well, in this moment, Dai was telling himself what he thought his parents thought of him. Am I on the right track, Dai?
Spot on.
And
it was definitely projecting.
How accurate did you find your thinking to be?
Well, I was 15 years old, and for me, because of my state of unhealth, puberty was delayed as well. So, it was tough, I just got to say, like my mindset was not in a healthy place. And so anybody trying to come to me to offer some sort of support, I always figured it was actually a personal attack. That's how I interpreted it, right? I interpreted it that way. I felt that it was that. But, when I decided to make that shift and make some changes, and approached my dad, like he ultimately saw that, whoa, this is Dai asking for my help now. It's not us having to try to coax him to accept our help. And, right then and there, my dad's like, okay, yes. What do you want to do? And I was like, you know what? When I was a kid, I used to love to bike. Can we get me a bike? Because also, truthfully, I wanted something that I could do on my own, where I didn't have to be around other people. I mean, I thought about the idea of going to a gym because, that's what people would do. They would go work out in a gym if they wanted to get healthy. But I was like, that place is full of mirrors and a bunch of equipment I have no idea how to use. I already feel that people stare at me when I'm walking around. I do not want to go there, And so this idea of getting on a bike every day was actually quite liberating and freeing, and something that I did have experience with in the past. And I did have some positive memories of what it was like doing that activity. So I committed to that, and I did. I started riding every day. And now this is really funny. You're going to appreciate this because, well, not all of you, but Dr. Heath, I think you will, because you'll remember what I'm talking about here. Do you remember the old Sony yellow bricks? The old AM, FM cassette players?
Yeah. That's been a minute or two.
Yep.
Yeah, my dad let me borrow his. And I had a tape, a 90-minute tape. And one side I had a band called Tragically Hip. The other side I had a band called Alice in Chains. And what I would do is I would put one side on and I would listen. And as soon as it flipped over, I knew it was time to turn around and go home. And that's how I would just get out and ride, listen to some music, just get out and just move my body. And within about a week, I decided, you know what? Okay, I'm starting to create some habit here. I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I got to learn how to eat. I don't know how to do that. And so I went to the library. I got books out on nutrition, right, and lifestyle. And my kids still joke about that. Dad, why don't you just Google it? I'm like, well, your dad's holding the Google,
Oh, why didn't you Google it? Of course.
And I'm like, anyways, they still laugh at that. But, it was a process. And it took almost 2 years. It was about 20 months to release the weight and to really create a new lifestyle. But I remember just one day, just doing things that I would normally have a to-do list every day, like I got to drink my water, I got to get my steps in, like I had some basic things every day that I would try to adhere to. So I had this recurring list. And I remember one day waking up and I have no idea, I was rushed or something, but I just remember it was about midway through the day, like after lunch. I'm like, oh, I didn't do my list this morning, but I had done the things that would normally be on my list. And I realized, wow, okay, this is the new me. This is who I am. This is becoming my new normal. And when that happened, it just it was like on autopilot. I just
wow.
did. And I just a little side note here, because some people wonder, how did I get into doing what I do today? And at 17, a friend of my mom's came over to the house and they're like, hey, is your mom around? Come up to the back porch, and I'm in the kitchen making myself some food, and they're standing there and they're speaking through the screen door on the back deck. It was like spring or summer. I don't remember when the months was exactly, but they're talking to me through this screen door, and they're like, hey, so is Betty Ann around? Your mom around? I'm like, oh yeah, she's in the back gardening somewhere back there, and you can just go have a chat with her. You just go back. You'll see her there. I'm trying to continue my cooking, and they just stood at the door. They were still staring at me, and I'm like, okay, what's up? She's out back. What do you want? I'm 17, right? This person's like well in their 40s, so more than twice my age. I'm like, okay, what's going on here? It's kind of weird. And they're like, well, actually, before we talk to you, can we talk to you? I was like, huh? What do you mean? Like his wife was there too, but she was so that's why he used the word we. But anyways, he ended up coming in. And he sat down at the table with me, and at this point, I'm actually sweating a little bit. I'm getting a little bit nervous because I'm like, what did I do on the weekend? Am I in trouble here? I'm like, here's someone of seniority to me, and I'm like, oh my goodness, they want to talk to me one-on-one. I don't know what's going on here. Anyways, they sat down. Next thing that came out of their mouths, they were praising and acknowledging the change that they'd seen in me over the last couple of years. The fact that I'd gone from being in that state of unhealth to now being very healthy and thriving, and my energy had changed, the way I reacted and interacted with people changed. And he then asked me something very specific that changed everything for me. He said, can you help me get healthy? And, at 17 years old, I had never seen anybody come to me. I never had that experience of someone coming to me to ask me for my advice, my input, my support. And it filled me like to the point that I was overflowing, with just excitement to help somebody else now. And I felt so fulfilled in that activity of helping that person. I was like, I don't care what I do for the rest of my life. I'm going to do this somehow, some way I will help people with this stuff.
Talk about a paradigm shift. Stephen Covey, in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he talks about a paradigm shift. In our profession, we call that cognitive restructuring. And I would guess, again, I'm not a good mind reader. I'd make a lot more money. I'd be psychic. I'd go to the casino and win big. But in that moment, I would say you had a huge paradigm shift, a cognitive restructuring of how you in that moment then began to see yourself.
Yes, that would be spot on for sure. I definitely saw myself as somebody that had something to offer of value. And, you know, some people still ask me, like, what was the main motivation for actually getting healthy? And I was like, well, you know, if I'm perfectly honest, I wanted a girlfriend too. Okay. Like I totally did. You know, at 15 years old, I saw all the other guys having conversations. I saw the girls acting, and I was like, I want some of that. I want some intimacy. I want someone to want me. You know, I want to feel like somebody wants me. And so that was a big motivator for me, you know, at that time as a teenage boy, you know, wanting to experience life a little bit differently than I had been at that point. And
how old are you? Not to hit a segue here or sidebar. How many years later did you meet your wife?
Well, I met her, it would be probably 5 to 6 years later. So
5 to 6 years later. Have you ever thought about if you had not gone through your struggles with weight and lack of good physiological health and your encounter with the steamy or the not steamy mirror, have you ever thought about if you hadn't gone through that, you would have maybe been more attracted to somebody? You may have met somebody when you were 15, but that would mean that you would not have your wife and you would not have the child that you have, your daughter.
Life would be very different.
Yeah.
You know, it would be very, very different. I know that. Like, there's no way I would have moved from Toronto to Vancouver. You know, I moved literally across the country at 18 years old. But I had this inner confidence that I could do that. Because as far as I was concerned, any change that I then had to now navigate in my life, I can handle.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I believed at that age, okay?
Yeah.
Was because I had just gone through a massive change, and I felt like I was the protagonist of my own life. I was the one that instigated the change. I said, I want this. I put things in action. And over time, I started to believe it, right? Like, at first, you know, you sort of go off a leap of faith. I'm like, okay, well, everybody says if you move your body regularly and you change how you eat, you should get healthy. I'm like, well, I don't know. Let's give this a try. And, you know, I started doing it. And sure enough, things got better. And the confidence increased and my clarity of what I needed to do next increased, which, you know, when you got clarity and confidence, you start to procrastinate less. You start to take a lot more decisive action and take the right steps.
It's very freeing, isn't it, to actually gain that control of your thought life about yourself. That's really very freeing, isn't it?
It was, but you know, I have to be honest with Dr. Heath and everybody that's here. I had gotten so good at working on the exterior. I'd never really done any inner work. And what I mean by that was I didn't really start with any of those types of questions like, who am I? What am I about? What am I passionate about? Like, I didn't really think about those things. I was always thinking about, how do I change how I look, how people perceive me, but without doing a lot of that inner development, you know? And as a result of that, you know, some of that social anxiety that I was dealing with as a kid, I actually, even when I got healthy, it still persisted.
Well, we call that, by the way, we call that external locus of control, the focus on what others think about me, which, you know, unless they tell us, how would we know? I mean, did you ever have people actually verbally walk up to you and ridicule your weight or your look?
Yes. When I was, especially around 11 to 14, it was pretty hard. Grade 7 and 8. Grade 7 and 8, there was a lot of bullying and just a lot of isolating. And I remember taking lots of sick days as well, just so I didn't have to go to school, you know.
And for those listening to Dai's experience here, let me just point out on that note that you can decide in that moment, as I did. I was bullied when I was young. I was bullied because I was just a little scrawny, nerdy pipsqueak of a kid. And it became, I'm not really sure why it happened. I can't put my finger on it, and it's Dai's time, not mine. But for some reason, I developed the belief that I could decide what to think about the information those kids were giving me. What they were giving me was data. I know that sounds like a very nerdy way of saying it, but what those kids were giving me with their behavior and their words was data. And it was up to me to fiddle-faddle with my own neurons and decide what to think about that and to not internalize that. And that was, you know, for me, that was my first encounter with the differentiation between internal locus of control, what I get to decide on, and external locus of control. And I think, I mean, that may be have you heard of that before, Dai, the internal versus external locus of control? But that's kind of the phenomenon that I think has made you so successful, is you're a guy that decides who you are.
The Therapy Bites podcast is HIPAA compliant. No identifying patient information will be disclosed by Therapy Bites podcast hosts or Therapy Bites podcast guests without permission from patients or guardians. All personal stories are de-identified in order to comply with HIPAA, the NASW Code of Ethics, and the ethical principles of psychologists and Code of Conduct. Fresh from the therapy couch and from the deep dark recesses, stories may involve exploding preconceived notions and topics uncomfortable to underthinkers and small farm animals. Audience discretion and duct taping your head for safety is advised. Concrete-headed Kool-Aid drinking humans assume all risks associated with any possibility of choking to death on the accurate, realistic thoughts presented in the art lab. This is natural selection, and Therapy Bites podcast management and hosts are not responsible.
Years ago, I had a patient named Sally, and I'm doing air quotes because that's not the patient's real name, of course, who talked about her husband always being angry. When I asked, how do you know that he's angry? She would say he has that angry look on his face. One of the worst things we can do in relationships is try to read faces, because faces really don't give us much information. For instance, and I'll be a bit of a shock jock here, a person may have that look on their face because they're constipated, or because they have a pebble in their shoe, or because they're really deep lost in thought. Why sabotage your relationship by personalizing it? You cannot read emotions from a facial expression, because a facial expression is behavior. If you want to know what someone is feeling, an emotion that is, the best thing to do is ask, what emotion are you feeling? If you want to know what they're thinking, ask, what thoughts are going through your head? The more we engage in conversation and get away from the mind reading of face reading, which really is mind reading and a psychic ability that none of us have, the more we will embiggen and elevate our relationships. Stop the face reading and commence with the deep levels of conversation and communication, and you'll see your relationships grow because of it. And Sally tried this, and she came back and said, guess what? That actually worked. Imagine that, a therapy technique that actually works by stopping doing something that doesn't work, such as face reading, and starting something that we all know does work, and that is active listening and healthy communication skills. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy the rest of the episode.
You're listening to Therapy Bites Art Lab, bite-sized therapy for your brain with Dr. Heath and the TBAL Team. The best advice on the net. No copay required.
Welcome to the Therapy Bites Art Lab Library, where we have poured over thousands of volumes to bring you the latest Couch Crumbs quote. Oh, would you like a napkin? You're getting crumbs in the book.
That okay. Me eat book.
Oh. And now today's Couch Crumbs quote.
Our quote today comes from Soren Kierkegaard, and it says, "The highest and most beautiful things in life are not to be heard about, nor read about, nor seen, but, if one will, are to be lived."
Oh, you got crumbs on the couch. Extra points for you.
Here's Heath and the T-Ball
Well,
Team.
thank you. I'm not familiar. I know I've heard of that in the past, but I'd never put two and two together. And the way you explained it actually was the best explanation I could have. So I'm gonna have to look into that a bit more, because it sounds very accurate, to what I was experiencing. But to be fair, I went from food and video games, movies being a crutch or an escape or a way of sort of distracting myself from my life, to now I found alcohol. At 17, I realized, to be social, to hang out with people, to really open up, and it wasn't planned. I didn't think, if I start drinking, I'm going to feel this way. I just remember getting invited, as I became healthier and a little bit more fit, I started associating with a different crowd at school and started getting invited to certain types of parties. And I remember going to them feeling like just unsure of myself, no confidence, and actually still dealing with a lot of that anxiety. And then I remember someone offering me a drink. I remember having that beer. I remember having a second one. And then all of a sudden it was like I was somebody different. And as that somebody different, I could interact with people. It was like I could reinvent myself. And, And what's really sad about this whole thing was this is a habit that continued for 15 years, where I just realized that alcohol could be a way for me to open up to other people, to be social, to be outgoing. And gosh, it was tough, right? Because I had a very hardwired belief that I needed alcohol to be like that.
What age would that have been, Dai?
So 17, 18, and that went on
till age 30, I guess.
Yeah, it started early, In Canada, the drinking age is 19. Not that it matters, but it's still, I was drinking under the age, and it wasn't legal, and so there was already that dynamic, which I was already stressed about. But then on top of that, trying to keep up with the Joneses, and what I mean by that was peer pressure. These new groups I was hanging out with, and it was silly, but I saw the attention I was getting, and I associated the attention and me getting that to also the person I was when I drank. And for me, it just became like a belief that I needed it. And that was tough because, then I met my wife in my early 20s, and I still had this habit of drinking to excess. But I was always a very jovial drunk. And in my TED talk last year, I shared the nickname people used to have for me. It was Fun Guy Dai, like that was the nickname. Even when I would go to trade shows in my early 30s, late 20s, with my company, I'd work the deals with the vendors, doing buys for the following year. And, they were like, okay, now the business is done. Where are you partying tonight? Because we want to be with you. I had this reputation. And it was weird because I was almost proud of that. I was. I believed that was part of my identity, and it was expected of me. But meanwhile, on the inside, after those evenings, I always felt tremendous amounts of guilt and shame. I felt.
Well, where did that come from? What kind of thoughts were you having where you thought that you were guilty of something?
Well, so here goes. My kids at this time were both under the age of 6 when I was at my worst. So this is going back 13 years ago. And, so they would have been 4 and 6 at this time. My wife and I had been together for a decade at this period. And, I was busy. I had co-founded a company with a partner, and we were scaling up and growing quite rapidly. We were on pace to do about 8 figures a year. And we eventually hit that number a couple of years later. But I exited out 7 years ago, but regardless, we were busy with work and developing this business. And, as such, there was a lot of work going out. I was away from home a fair bit, but also, trying to prioritize family. I always had a belief in my mind, what kind of man do I want to be? There was that internal question, that sort of internal dialogue, what kind of man, what kind of person, what kind of dad, husband, father, business owner, community leader. I started to quantify and qualify what I believed that was, and tried to be very intentional. As I started to lean more into professional, but more specifically personal development, I started to realize I had a big imbalance. I had worked on a lot of professional development, developing a lot of skills and assets. But when it came to that internal personal development and creating space to answer some of those more purpose and why type questions about my own life, I found I would always sort of sheep away from that, just sort of distract myself from answering or having those conversations. And it became a bone of contention with my wife, especially, because she wanted to talk about life. She wanted to talk about the dream and these dreams that we would co-create together for our lives that we were living. And I always felt guilt around that. I felt guilty about being out and drinking to blackout, because I would often forget about what I did after the fact. And I'd made some dumb choices. It led to some narcotic use at times. It also led to some promiscuity. I'm not proud of this. I was a very different person over 13 years ago. But yet I had some of those internal values because that's how I was raised. I was raised Christian. I had a lot of Christian beliefs, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Just some of these core beliefs were there. And this idea of being kind, being generous with our kindness, helping others. That was always there, but it would be compromised based on this sort of duality I was living. And I didn't really understand. I didn't understand what was going on, and I didn't know how to change.
Do you think that the guilt, do you think, now a little psychological tidbit here as we teach people that guilt is actually a thought process. It is a legal determination of some judiciary. And in humans, we become that judiciary. We actually pronounce ourselves guilty. Would you? Is it accurate to say that you were pronouncing yourself guilty of not living up to who you knew you could be?
I felt like there was a huge gap between who I was showing up as and who I intended to be. So yeah, there was definitely it felt like a chasm, and you know, I filled that chasm with as much as I could, but it was often just, you know, killing time, so to speak, and you know, with parties and buying stuff and just looking for ways to try to fill that void, if you will, and nothing seemed to work. And because I was seeking answers outside of myself, you know, believing that's what I had to do to find whatever it was I was looking for, without actually just turning the focus inward to ask myself, well, what are the values that I'm not willing to compromise on? Do I live by those every day? When do I compromise them? And I would find when I would drink, I would compromise my values quite frequently. You know, I would do things that I would normally be very against. And there was that conflict and that internal conflict that really created a lot of those feelings for me, those negative feelings. And, you know, it all came to a head when my wife sat me down one day after me not coming home till wee hours in the morning and then passing it on the floor next to the bed. I didn't make it to the bed. You know, I passed it on the Berber carpet to the side of the bed. And that next morning got up around 11 a.m. and my wife had already been up for hours with the kids, you know, but I woke up to the sound of dishes. And you have to understand, in our house, you have to go down the hallway, down the stairs, around a corner to get into the kitchen. And I think everybody in our neighborhood knew she was unloading the dishwasher that morning. She was not being kind to the dishes, right? And so I knew something was up. I was like, oh boy, I'm in it now. And got down there and there was a look on her face that I'd never seen to that point. And I knew, I was like, oh boy, I've really messed up now. And she sat me down, and first thing out of her mouth was like, you know, this is not an environment I'm willing to raise our girls in any longer.
Wow.
You know, let's talk about what it's going to look like to co-parent. And I was like, holy smokes, I can't believe this is happening. Because like I said, family's been one of my core values. And all of a sudden I saw for the first time in my life, I was like, oh boy, this thing that I prioritize and I'm proud of, that makes me feel so good and love and just, and I was like, it's all going away. And this is my fault. To sort of speed up things, you know, my wife actually asked me a question, and this is the question that changed everything for me. She asked me, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters?
Wow. I use that question all the time. Oh, bless her heart.
It was the first time I've ever been asked.
One wise woman.
Dr. Heath was like getting punched in the nose and kicked between the legs at the same time. Okay. I was like, whoa, you know, and pardon the pun, but it was an extremely sobering question as well, because it was in that moment I made a commitment to myself. I made a commitment that I'd go 1 year without drinking. And please, to put this into context, you know, from the age of 17 when I started drinking, the longest I'd ever gone is 1 month without drinking. Because, you know, I do the occasional sober January and that kind of stuff, but never really committing to long periods of time of sobriety. And because I always believed I needed it to function. I needed it to be social, like, especially for my profession. I believed that it was something I needed. You know, I made this commitment to her and then to my daughters, but more importantly, saying that I'm making this commitment to myself. And I remember my 6-year-old daughter at the time, she's looking up from the couch, you know, they're all sitting there as I'm talking to them, and my daughter Chardonnay's looking up, and she's got these big, strong prescription glasses because she had a lazy eye at that time that we were correcting. And so she had these big prescription glasses. And so her eyes just looked like they were ginormous, right? And she's looking up at me from the couch. She's like, oh, okay, Daddy. You know, and she's like, so no juice, no pop. You know, she's like, you know, to this idea of not drinking for a year. And I'm like, no adult drinks. And I have to tell that part because, you know, in this moment of what could be seen as extreme sadness and stress and anxiety and just like this, oh my gosh, like, woe is me, she brought lightness to the whole thing. And you know, Christy and I caught our gaze to each other. We laughed about it. We realized, oh no, we have to qualify this a bit more, you know, and it was awesome. You know, in that moment, I felt like this is the best decision I've ever made in my life. And next to asking my wife to get married, you know, and having my kids, obviously. And, you know, but yet it felt just like that moment when I was 15 looking in the mirror. Like it was a similar feeling, this sort of a rush of confidence that I can do this. And I'm excited to do this, to prove to myself that I can. And I started. It was like cold turkey. I just stopped drinking. And I learned pretty quickly, though, within the first month or so, that this was going to be way harder than I thought. But I was prepared to journey it, and I needed help.
Was it as difficult as you thought it would be? Because I'm going to say, Dai, that's very incredible. I do substance abuse treatment routinely, almost every day. And I do a lot of DOT cases, which is the Department of Transportation. You can't fly a plane, drive a train, drive a boat. commercially or drive a truck commercially if you have a drug or drinking problem. And for somebody to do what you did, I mean, that is incredibly exceptional. I mean, what would you say, or what was a couple of questions, just real quick, I don't mean to interrupt, but was it as hard as you thought it would be? And what are some maybe specific mechanics that helped you succeed at doing that?
Well, when I worked as a psychologist and a counselor, it was cognitive behavioral therapy and a bit of logotherapy. Those are the two pieces that
logotherapy. For heaven's sakes. We're huge fans of Viktor Frankl.
Yes.
Me too.
Yes.
Dr. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning.
Yes.
One of the best books I've ever read in my life. You know, it's right up there with The Alchemist, Paulo Coelho. I don't know if you've read that one as well. But, it's more fiction, but it's also just great books. They're up there. And, anyways, that was very helpful. But the work itself, the first few months was challenging because what I realized was a lot of my circles of what I believe were friends were drinking friends, were friends that were very much social friends that were used to that fun guy die. And I realized that, you know, for me to lean into some of these changes, I was going to have to change some of my association. And in fact, you know, at the end of that year, almost all my association changed. And, you know, it was for the best. I was a bit concerned about it initially because I thought, oh, okay, my friends will support me. And what I realized was, you know, eventually they stopped calling. You know, they just stopped inviting me because it's really weird. You know, you go to watch UFC at the pub with the guys and, you know, by the second fight in, you know, everybody else is like, the conversation's not on the same page. Let's just put it that way. I'm literally longing for deeper conversation, deeper connection, deeper understanding of what I believe are my friends, but the conversation never went there. And so I was at a different place now, and I was moving away from that. And I realized, you know, the longer I stayed associated with them, the harder it was going to be for me to navigate these changes that I want for me, want for my life, want for my family. And once I got past that, you know, things actually started to get a lot better because I did get some extra support. My family was very supportive. I really recommitted to my health and well-being on a holistic level. So mentally, emotionally, spiritually, as well as financially, just really looking at wherever there was stress and overwhelm in my life. I just started to just try to do a little bit here and there to see that areas improve. And over time, that compounds in a real positive way. It's not a matter of trying to do everything all at once, but just a little bit every day, you know?
It's kind of like, as we say, eating an elephant, isn't it?
Yes.
A bite at a time.
Well,
you know, I find that people that try to tackle almost anything, I mean, of course, addiction with alcohol or drugs, it could also be fitness, anything, they really want to smack a home run right off the bat. I mean, no pun intended. I just see what I did, a home run right off the bat. See, it just comes out. But that is just routinely unsuccessful because it's really, as you point out, we call it task segmentation. If you can break it down into its smallest parts, well, that breeds a lot more success than waiting around expecting to hit a home run.
That makes so much sense. And that's what it ended up working out as, you know, like from the standpoint that it was a little bit every day. And, you know, at the end of 12 months, I remember my wife very specifically, you know, it was right around New Year's and she's like, hey, do you want to celebrate your year and share a bottle of wine together, you know, on the deck. But
a little bit of the hair of the dog that bit you.
Well, and what's really funny was because my wife, I had tried some 12-step programs. I'm not here to vilify that or just anything negative.
It's okay, go ahead.
It just wasn't a fit for me.
Yeah.
It was not a fit. I had a real hard time swallowing the pill they were trying to make me swallow that I was forever going to be an alcoholic.
But Dai, you know, if you were here, I would give you a bear hug.
Yes.
I would love
Honest to goodness, I'd give you a bear hug. We
100%.
talked before the episode about labeling, and one of the most disabling things you can do. Labeling is one of the most disabling things you can do.
Yes.
And I remind people, here's a quick test of, are you always going to be this thing called an alcoholic, or are you going to always be this thing called whatever diagnostic label is? Can you learn a new phone number? Well, sure. As long as your brain is learning, your brain is changing. And to label somebody as a drug addict or an alcoholic is not only existentially to deny their humanity, it is also just bad neuroscience, because as long as the brain is able to learn, it is in fact able to change and is changing. And thank you for pointing that out.
Yes,
that is talk about home runs. That's a home run for this episode.
Well, you know what, I was. It just felt that way. Again, I think it's one of those things where I think there's a lot of people that probably feel something similar, but it just didn't feel right for me. That's all. Like it just did not feel right. And I tried. Like I honestly thought, well, maybe this is the solution. Maybe this is my problem. But the more I went into it, and the more I read, and I got into all the literature. I started having conversations with people around the groups, and I was like, this just doesn't feel like the healthy solution for me. Like, and I'm saying healthy because it was all about constantly owning my past transgressions and reliving these moments again and again. Like it like defines me in my future. And I'm like, no, I'm not accepting that, you know, like just because I was morbidly obese as a teen doesn't mean I'm always going to be the fat kid. I mean, like I may mentally, I carried that forward with me, but I moved past that eventually, you know, like it was a period of my life. And there was a period of my life that I definitely abused alcohol. I had a very bad relationship with that. And at the end of that year, my wife, she saw in me this massive shift. Like it was like a full 180. Like a lot of these things that I had said I always wanted to be as a man and as a father, as a husband, you know, as a business owner, a brother, a son, like I started manifesting a lot. I started being that. And, you know, so my wife offered me that to share a bottle of wine. And here's the thing. I looked at her. It's like, Christy, so much has changed in the last year. What if I keep going? And, you know, 13 years now, okay? 13 years, I haven't had a drink. And it just keeps getting better and better. And you know, it's a choice. And I got to follow it up with actions and the right actions. But, hey, I've had moments of, you know, regression here and there, like we all do. But I've never had another drink because I don't feel I need it. I don't have any value. But trust me, though, in that period of time that I drank, I've had a few lifetimes worth, okay? So
yeah.
Don't feel bad.
And we recommend to patients, if you want the best way to celebrate healthy behavior is with more healthy behavior.
Yes.
Don't celebrate healthy behavior regressing into unhealthy behavior, you know?
Exactly.
I mean, if you've been eating rat poison and you've titrated off a rat poison, the best celebration is not to go eat some more rat poison, you know.
Oh, yes. But meanwhile, like if you think about the way that antibiotics work, or more importantly, how we fight viruses, right? Like how we treat that stuff is always with a little bit of the actual virus itself to build up that natural immunity. I wonder if there's any, I think about health is the same way though. I think it's that same effect because once you just start moving your body a little bit, and I mean with purpose, like get outside for a half an hour of a walk in the fresh air and sunlight. Holy smokes. I don't know anybody that comes back from that and doesn't feel better. You know, like it just takes a little bit. And that's right. When you're feeling good, you want to stay feeling good. Right. And it's, and also, you know, one little side note, because I always like to throw this out to people. It's like just starting to do more things that you don't regret. And what I mean by that is I've never had a client send me a message saying, hey, Dai, I know you asked me to have a big salad today at lunch with, you know, that cedar plank salmon. I know you wanted to have lots of colors like the rainbow. Well, I ate it. It's now 2 p.m. And you know what? I really regret having that for lunch today. Like I've never had that. Okay. Having a salad versus a burger. Right. Like, but also I've never had anybody send me a message, you know, hey, Dai, you know that workout you programmed for me today? I really regret working out. I really regret doing it. You know, and I'm like,
no.
You never do that. Like when you do healthy things that make you feel good and you know it's good because you feel it holistically throughout your entire body and it shows and radiates out. I mean, you never regret doing those things.
Well, as we say here in the R Lab, it's because you have found meaning and value in it. And I think that's the key to motivation is finding meaning and value in something. And as we'll also say, motivation is based on thinking and is based on the back of thinking healthy things. And then discipline is built on the back of motivation. Discipline is more the routine, the implicit processing of it. And so, as you pointed out earlier, the more healthy things you do, guess what's going to happen? If there's magic, this is it. The more healthy things you do, the more healthy things you will find yourself doing. The term in psychology or neuroscience is long-term potentiation. Those neurons that are programmed to do these healthy things just reach out and they make friends of other neurons that are then encouraged to join in the party of doing more healthy things. It's really about making a healthy party amongst the neurons, the brain cells in your head.
I like that healthy party reference. I'm like, I can just see them in there right now, throwing down, disco fever, you know? Like, I got a little disco ball going right now. Yeah, it's a ranger in there, but I love that. I'm totally digging that analogy, or metaphor. But you know what? The coolest thing about change is, when I think back to when I was 15, because some people, I know that was a big deal because that cemented my belief in myself that I could do change. And what I mean by that is that I can actually be a protagonist for change. But I didn't really believe it until I was about 3 weeks into that commitment of redefining what health is to me and really just moving my body, changing how I eat. And I told you, I'd go out on these long 90-minute bike rides, right? 45 minutes out, the tape would flip over to the B side, and then I know it was time to turn around and go home. Well, I would ride out, and I grew up outside of Toronto, so that's out east in eastern. It's in Ontario, and Toronto's like our biggest city in Canada, and I lived about an hour east of it in a small rural community, and we had a lot of farmland around there, apple orchards actually, and so I had lots of areas to ride my bike, and this one route that I would ride had this massive hill. Now keep in mind, I live in the west coast of Canada now. I can see the Rockies from my window. Those are mountains, but where I grew up in Ontario, as a 15-year-old morbidly obese kid on a mountain bike at the time, that hill, in all standards, felt like Everest to me. Okay, like it was, and I would start to. I remember the first time riding up that hill, I made about a third of the way, and then my bike just stopped. Like I stopped. I'm like trying to pedal. I'm like, I'm not moving, and boom, and off to the side. And this is what I have to remind myself and those that are listening. I had the know-it-all to say, okay, I'll just walk it up. And I did. I walked the bike to the top. I didn't turn around and go home, which, that was how I felt. I wanted to do that, to be honest with you, but I didn't. I just said, no, I'm going to walk it to the top and I'll keep going. Well, every day I'd come back to that. I'd make it up a little bit further, a little bit further, 3 weeks in. And I don't remember when it happened exactly, but I remember one day coming to that and I kept my head down. I just kept pedaling. And next thing you know, I'm on top of the hill. I didn't have to get off my bike. And I'll tell you, in that moment, I was like, holy crap, I did it, and it was just this immense feeling of pride in myself. But I also realized that, man, it was 3 weeks ago, I couldn't do this. And now I can in 3 weeks. Whoa. And you talk about that belief in oneself that I am making change happen and it feels good. So I'm going to keep doing this. And so I really believe in people experiencing a win early on. That thing that solidifies that belief in ourselves that, wow, change not only is possible, but I am the one that's now the champion of the change in my own life. I'm making it happen. And so I always encourage people, whatever it is you do, just make sure that you experience a win early on. Because remember, the win doesn't happen by accident. It happens because of what you do, and how you show up and the way you attack whatever that is, that thing is that you want to see progress forward in a certain direction. And so, yeah, I thought I'd better share that because, it's just that's amazing.
And that's so very, very true, is to get in that early win. And it doesn't have to be a big home run. If you want to get your body moving, it doesn't have to be a 45-minute bike ride one way, 45 back. It can be 7 minutes. You can commit to yourself, set an appointment with yourself, 7 minutes. What is that? That's 3.5 minutes one way, 3.5 minutes the other. Just begin. Just start out. The rest will take care of the rest. And Dai's, completely right. Get in that early win. Set that doable commitment, and then engage in that doable commitment, and then it'll grow. It'll take care of itself from there. That's all great stuff, and that is so wonderful.
Is someone ever too old to get started for change, like physical change or any change?
Well, I have to be honest with you, Debbie. We can always change, but I think sometimes the way we look at change, especially let's just talk about physical or health changes, right? Because they're a very personal thing. It's a personal journey. I have yet to find a job or a career where they're like, hey, Dai, we're going to pay you to just do self-care. I'm available. I don't care what you pay me. I'll do it. But it's on us, right? We have to do it for ourselves. But sometimes we think about when we were younger and doing those physical changes may have been a little bit easier. We were a bit more adaptable. But if that's where our memory is of change, and then we try to do that maybe 20 years later, we realize the physicality has changed, you know, and what I mean by this is you can still do it, but the way you do it might have to be slightly tweaked than the way that you used to do it, because we do change. Like our bodies change, our hormones change, our composition changes, bone density, like every aspect of who we are changes. I just invite people. It's like, yes, you can, but don't try to do everything all at once. It's like, you know, prime example is January 1st, right? Like, look at January 1st. People are like, oh, you know what? I want to be a runner. Great.
Yeah.
How much running have you done in the last year? None. Great. Okay. So what are you going to start? What's the starting distance? Well, I'm going to start with 10Ks. Okay.
Oh, my word.
Oh, goodness.
Go for it. Yeah. And, you know, 3 days in, I'm like, so how'd it go? Well, I haven't started yet. I went out and I pulled my hamstring.
Oh my goodness. I tell people, let's start by walking to the mailbox.
Yes. Thank you, Doggy. Yes.
Yep.
And by the way, on Debbie's question on the aging thing, one of my favorite studies, and this is an old study, it came out, gosh, I don't know, probably well over 20 years ago, is that in a participant sample of elderly folks, and I think, you know, this was 65 and older, that just 20 minutes of walking, 10 minutes one way, 10 minutes back, in 20 minutes of walking 3 days a week, there were measurable, important, statistically significant increases in cognitive status. When you begin to exercise at any age, especially older, you are actually being a friend to your brain. You are biggie sizing your cognitive ability. It's not all about the muscle. You're protecting your brain from further cognitive decline.
Oh, it's so good. I'm glad that you bring that up, because you got to keep the brain healthy, right? Like, brain's not healthy. Well, it's pretty hard to keep everything else healthy. And, but physical changes are possible at any age. It's just the way that we do it might have to change a bit with us. So don't be afraid of trying different things. But the one thing that I think we can take away from what you said, Dr. Heath, is, you know, that idea of walking. I mean, you think about locomotion. You think about what is one physical skill you would like to be able to maintain till the day you die. Well, I think that's walking. You know, to be able to have the freedom to move from point A to point B. I mean, it's funny. When you can't walk, you realize how big of an impact it makes on our quality of life.
Oh, sure. And here's a tidbit for you, Dai. Let me know if you've heard of this. If you're studying for something, if there's some bit of data or knowledge that you want to encode, one of the best ways to do it is do the studying of it while you're in motion. There is a clear connection between ambulation, that's walking, and actually encoding of data. We learn best when we're moving.
That's so good. Well, I like to hear that. Thank you for the reminder, because it's also why I actually listen to audiobooks when I work out.
Hey,
or when I'm going for my bike rides. Like, I don't listen to the music anymore. No more Tragically Hip and AC/DC.
Hey, or podcasts. By the way, you listeners, listen to Therapy Bites Art Lab while you're walking. You'll remember this stuff.
And, you know, we were talking about, you know, having a healthy mind. Whenever you do have clients come in that are struggling with maybe kind of a self-sabotaging thoughts, you know, like, well, there's no way I can do this. I don't think I can make it, you know, and they're maybe struggling with avoidance as well. What kind of advice do you give to them? How do you help them get out of that unhealthy, unhelpful mindset?
Well, to be fair, I often ask them to explain a bit more why they feel that way. Because it's good to have, and I'm going to riffing off what you said earlier, Dr. Heath, data. We need more data. Okay. So, you know, totally nerd out here, but we need to know more. And because also I want to understand what is maybe their relationship with fitness in their life. And like, how is it played out? Is there an actual value when they think fitness? Like, do they think this is something that is important to me? It helps me at any period in their life to that point in time. Because if that doesn't exist, we might have to do a little bit of, well, exploration, because it almost feels like a negotiation. And what I mean by that is so my former company, I used to sell fitness equipment, accessories, supplements, apparel. We did it all across Canada, e-commerce. The company's still going. I'm just no longer a part of it. But, you know, the cool thing was I got to deal with lots of different types of people, you know, and different ages, different sizes, different demographics, socioeconomic backgrounds. Like, it was everything, just this whole array of people. That's the advantage when you work in retail. You get to see all sorts of cool people. And everybody's relationship with health is slightly different. It's very personal, highly subjective. I find that when I would ask people, it's like, well, what is health to you? And the answers you get are so varied. But there is some commonalities. And they'll often say energy. I hear this from everybody. It's like, well, I just wish I had more energy. I wish I felt more motivated. You know, I wish I felt like I knew if I did certain things, I would get results. You know, like ultimately that's what they would say. Like they just didn't believe that they could actually experience change or they could get healthy. And that's very debilitating. You know, it actually prevents us from even starting. And so to answer your question, you know, if people are really challenged with this idea of getting started, it's like, well, how much time can you prioritize every day for you? You know, and I mean, this is non-negotiable time for you and you just to prioritize a little bit of your health. Now, I don't even start to get into quantitating, you know, like what you're going to do and how long you're going to do it. I'm not worried about any of that stuff. I'm only worried about, are you prepared to set aside a little bit of time every day to just say that health is important for you? And I'll eventually get to a point where they're like, okay, I can give you a little bit of time. I'm like, okay, how much can you give me? You know, how much can you give yourself that I can help you and support you with today? And they're like, well, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes. I'm like, really? That's all? How about 30 minutes? Can you give me 30 minutes? You know? And they're like, whoa, geez, 30 minutes. I'm like, well, hey, can I see your smartphone? Can you pull up this screen for me? I just want to see, because most people don't realize this, but our phones are on default settings now, and they track how much we're on our phone every day. Mm-hmm. And I ask people, go to this section on your phone, just see. Oh boy,
I think I know where this is going.
It is. But as soon as they start to have this recognition and this realization that, whoa, I do spend a few hours a day just surfing the web.
That's crazy.
Watching Netflix. Like they have to come to that realization. So all I can do is sort of invite them to check on a few things so they start to validate, like, whoa, I had no idea I actually used that much, you know, because it'd be 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. And so here's the cool part. 30 minutes, because once I get them to agree to 30 minutes, that's only 2% of your 24-hour day.
Wow.
2%. Like, that's not very much. Come on, you got 2%. And I'm like, because you know why it matters? Because you're worth it.
Yeah.
You are worth it. And if you don't believe you're worth it, I believe it. And I know if you talk to your closest family members that love you.
And that's back to where we're talking about finding value and meaning in something.
Yes.
And a lot of people, they do. We see all kinds of patients that come in. And one of the biggest psychological hurdles, which we call a cognitive distortion, is not believing in your own value, in your own worth. That, well, goodness, I mean, Mr. Rogers, I'm not sure if you Canadian folks are familiar with Fred Rogers, of course, I guess the whole world is. That you are the only you that has ever existed in the entirety of the universe, and you're the only you that will ever exist in the entirety of the universe, and that's inherent worth. So take care of yourself. You know, you are a gift to the universe, and that gift has value and deserves to be taken care of, and you are the gift. Your presence, listen to this, your presence is a gift to the universe. You get it, your presence, gift.
I heard it. I got it, Doctor. I was about to say, drop the mic, but your mic's already suspended, so that's probably for the best part. But I love that. And it's so on point, you know, but I think it's really interesting when people start to feel a little bit better. Because when I first start with people, I ask them just to start drinking 3 liters of water a day. So that's like not quite a gallon. It's like 3/4 of a gallon. Like, it may sound like a lot of water, because if you're someone that doesn't drink much water in a day, it is a lot of water. But when you look at it, typically it's a little bit more than what is the recommend per day, you know, sort of that 8 glasses a day. And I always like add about 50% more, because if you're actually moving and doing stuff, you're actually, you know, giving off a lot of water. You're using a lot.
Oh, sure. And you can work your way up to it. You can start low, titrate, you know, start low, go slow. A good slogan for life, start low, go slow. But for those listening, you can Google hydration calculator. There are hydration calculators on the web, and that is an algorithm. And the factors tend to be body weight, caloric intake, climate, and activity level. And you can input those things, and it will tell you. And for me, by the way, it's about a gallon a day for me, and I will get a little bit more than that. But most people aren't dehydrated. If you're dehydrated, you should not be listening. You should go to the ER. Most people are not dehydrated. They are suboptimally. They're suboptimally hydrated. And what's the difference? What's the problem with that? It's about like sun exposure. If you spend decades in a state of suboptimal hydration, it will have a cumulative effect over your lifetime, and one of those effects is on cognition.
Correct.
Dehydrated brains do not function well.
Water's in every cell of our body.
Yep.
Every cell. There's a little bit of H2O, and but the thing is, and if this will resonate with people most on this point, and it's something I like to remind people of, but it's like, if you've ever driven a car, you let that oil gauge go down to near dry, and you try to drive that sucker around. You're going to know pretty quickly, whoo, this isn't optimal anymore. And the longer you go like that, the more problems you're going to have when you go in to see the technician, the mechanic. And well, your body's the same way. And think about the oil as water, all right? It's our natural lubricant. And as soon as you start getting back to that optimal level, you'll find that your metabolism improves, your quality of sleep improves, your ability to move improves, because it also flushes a lot of the natural inflammation that we tend to build up if we're not very active. And we eat certain types of foods, or we have other sorts of like maybe drinking or a lot of caffeinated beverages or sugars, like those will affect inflammation in our body. So water is a great way to also flush a lot of that. So our joints feel a little bit better. And when our joints feel better, we tend to move a little bit more because we feel better, and so it's so subtle. But the biggest thing, and what the one that I find really, well, especially a lot of my female clients, they are always surprised at this. But when we talk about metabolic function, just our body's ability to burn calories naturally, just to do what we do in a day. So it's something called basal metabolic rate, which is just, if you were to stay in bed all day, your body still needs calories to do all the things it needs to do in the body. So that's sort of our basal rate, or our foundation rate. And if you are dehydrated, like chronically, suboptimal, your metabolism will be slowed upwards of about 50 to 70 calories a day. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but compound that over 365 days, and just to equate this as about 3,500 calories in a pound of fat. Well, it doesn't take long to add up to that sort of 5 to 7 pounds of extra fat in a year, just by being suboptimal when it comes to being hydrated with water. So subtle, but that's what it means. So back to what you said, Dr. Heath, that idea of that chronic suboptimal level of hydration. We're just talking water right now, but you might not be doing yourself some favors, and you might actually be putting on some extra pounds, even though you're trying to do everything right, but you're just not getting enough water. So it's so simple, yet if it was simple, we'd all be doing it. So
absolutely, the body is an instrument that over time requires fine tuning, and it is all about optimizing each of those controls. As we start winding down the episode, Dai, a couple kind of closing questions. One is any parting comments, words of wisdom you can share, and then also we don't want to depart without folks knowing how to reach out to you and connect if they want more of your message and more of your wisdom. And so let me just turn it over to you and share with us some parting thoughts and how people can stay in contact.
Well, thanks, Dr. Heath, and everybody. This has been great. I absolutely love it. I love the energy in this room. And this has just been so much fun. And, I'm going to riff on something. So I had an experience a few years ago, because I'd always struggled with meditation. I was one of those people like, Ken, you want me to sit still and just close my eyes and breathe? What? Are you crazy? No, thank you. I've always struggled with meditation. But yet, if you get in tune, okay, I have to watch how I say this, because I know some people, they tune out when you start getting a little bit more spiritual. But let me put it this way. We have a good ability of manifesting things in our lives. Because, you talk about the reticular activation system, and this the way that, our subconscious can help us become more aware of things that are happening, especially things that we want to happen or we desire. And so I've always been struggling with meditation. And a number of years ago, when my family and we were living in Bali for 2.5 years, this is all pre-pandemic. And while we were there, I had the number of conversations with people just talking about how much I struggle with meditation. So what's really interesting about Bali, Indonesia, is it's like one of the meccas of yoga. And so yoga always brings a lot of very spiritual individuals, very open to that conversation. And they all have an opinion, okay? So as soon as I started having these conversations, expressing my frustration with meditation, no joke of a lie here, 3 different people over a span of a week said, you know what? I did a Vipassana retreat, and it changed my relationship with meditation and myself. And I was like, Vipassana, what is that? It's a 10-day silent retreat where you literally sit on a pillow from morning to night for 10 days, okay? It's pretty intense. It's like one of the hardest things I've ever done. but I learned how to meditate. And it made a huge difference. But here was the lesson that I learned from the meditation instructor that was there. They said, this too shall pass. And what's super fascinating is, we're quoting Buddha about 2,500 years ago, kind of paraphrasing something that he said, this idea of this too will pass. Because, in our lives, we get lots of challenges, for sure. I mean, it's a given. If you're alive on this planet, you're navigating challenges every day. But it's okay. It's just part of life. It's how we all evolve. It's not a bad thing, because things are always changing. Nothing stays the same. And if you look at the universe, it's impermanent, meaning that everything's always in a flux of change. And science proved this, by the way. About 100 years ago, the scientists finally got their minds all together and all the materials together, and they were able to prove, you know what, guys? Nothing stays the same. The universe is constantly changing. And it's like, okay, cool. Buddha was right 2,500 years ago. Look at that, woo. And so this too shall pass. And here's my instructor. I'm like, talking to them and saying, well, and okay, so sorry. I know you're probably thinking it's a silent retreat. You shouldn't be talking. Well, the meditation instructor would pull you aside for about 10 minutes. And then they would, talk to you briefly just to make sure that you're having the right experience. If you have any questions about the technique. And I started voicing, she brought up this idea that this too shall pass. And my belief of that was that, anything that's bad in our lives, don't worry, we'll eventually get through it. It will pass. It will become something that's behind us so we can progress forward. And she said, yeah, but Dai, when Buddha said this too shall pass, he was actually talking more so about all the great things that happen in our lives. The first time that you met your wife, the first time that your kids were born, that first time you got a promotion at your career, the first time that you helped a client and they said to you, man, you helped me change my life. Those too will pass. So be present for them. Be aware of them, because whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's all going to pass eventually. So be present for your life. All the good, the bad, and the, oh boy, but be present for it. And that's all I want to impart to everybody that's listening or watching this right now. It's okay. It's all going to pass. So just be aware of what's happening right now, because that's all that we got. And you're going to have a great life for it, lots of experiences. And it's who makes us who we are. So if you want to get a hold of me, I'm active on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook, just at Dai Manuel. I also have a website, daimanuel.com. I've got about 1,700 articles I've published since 2007 there, all geared around helping people live their best life, and getting out of their own way to do so. So if you're like me and you need some help with that, it's a great place to begin the journey. So thank you, Dr. Heath. Thank you, team, for allowing me to be here with you all today. This has just been absolutely magical. And I absolutely love the space that you've created and the fact that you hold space for these types of conversations and for all of us to be flies on the wall and observing it. It's awesome. It really is.
Hey, thank you so very much. And thank you, listeners, for joining in. I appreciate you being here. And just a parting thought, remember that your level of ability, 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the future, depending on your age, you are engineering that level of ability right now. Also, though, you're engineering whatever level of disability you will have. I would encourage you to start optimizing your health, as Dai very well educated us on today, so that you will have more of the ability and less of the disability. But largely, that's up to you. Thanks for joining us. Catch the next episode. Bye-bye, guys. See you next time.
Bye, guys.
Hey, T-Ballers. Thanks so much for being with us today. If we brought value to your day, show us some love by leaving your positive feedback and inviting some friends to listen in and join the T-Ball team. Next time on Therapy Bites Art Lab.
Hey, T-Ballers, we have a special treat for you today. We have Sean Tyler Foley on the episode called Speaking Naked. Oh my goodness, oh my, what could we be talking about? I have my shirt on, I'm out of uniform. Speaking Naked, the psychology of life on stage. Do you have fears of speaking? Are you thinking that you're not up to the task? Do you hate hearing your voice, seeing your face? Join us coming up next. We're gonna boost your self-esteem with Sean Tyler Foley. That's next.
Government legal gobbledygook. Therapy Bites is not intended as a diagnostic or as an alternative to professional clinical treatment. Resources and advice are for information and entertainment purposes only. Brought to you by someone saying things you don't like? Tape that nagging loudmouth shut. Government-approved speech tape. Gas tape. Now available at your local hardware store. Therapy Bites Art Lab is not an approved, endorsed, authorized, butt-kissing affiliate of the United States Special Offense Assessment Police. SOAP for short. Warning. Consumption of Therapy Bites Art Lab content by Kool-Aid drinking, stinking, thinking, social media, pseudo-psychological pushing, wacky woke, anti-free speech, mumbo-jumbo advocates may cause spontaneous internal skull combustion, stomach discomfort, and or laxative effects. Allergy warning. Therapy Bites is manufactured in a facility that challenges nutty distortions, processes nuggets of accurate, realistic thinking, and life-affirming beliefs. This is the audio version of the legal fine print. Why are you still listening to this when you can catch the next great episode of Therapy Bites Art Lab with a good friend or family member? Really? Are you still there? This is getting silly. Move on to the next psychologically thrilling episode of the best advice on the net. No copay required.
Me eat copay.
Yeah, with Dr. Heath and the TBAL Team. Go ahead, don't be podgoraphobic. Scoot, scoot, scoot. On to the next episode.